Hello, everyone.
I'm Karl.
And I'm Em.
Welcome to our podcast discussing all of the latest books. This is our 13th episode, and we will be discussing A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. As always, we will be saving our ratings till the very end.
We promise to give you all of our honest opinions on all the characters, chapters, and scenarios. We don't mean any harm to any of the authors. This is solely our opinion. We promise, as always, to Karl and Em like we read them.
Period. Be sure to check any trigger warnings before you dive into this episode or book. There are none at the beginning of the
It's good
book.
to know. Yeah, it's good to know that this is fantasy. So,
Yes.
this is not based on any realism,
Yes.
hardly at all.
Yeah, but
So,
there's torture, death, mental health struggles, starving, poverty, things like that. So just take care of yourselves. And spoilers will lie ahead for this book.
Carly's going to have to filter herself tremendously because she's read the entire series and I have not. So, she is going to try not to spoil anything for me.
Correct.
If you don't want to hear how this book ends, please pause here and go ahead and read the book and then come back to this episode. Are you ready to get started?
Let's get into it. Okay, I'm going to read the little intro / summary that's normally on the back of the book, just to kind of refresh your memory for what the book's about. Or if you haven't read the book and you're just listening to the episode, you'll kind of know where we're going to go. So, when 19-year-old huntress Feyre kills a wolf in the woods, a terrifying creature arrives to demand retribution. Dragged to a treacherous magical land she knows only about from legends, Feyre discovers that her captor is not truly a beast, but one of the lethal immortal fairies who once ruled her world. At least, he's not a beast all of the time. As she adapts to her new home, her feelings for the fairy, Tamlin, transform from icy hostility into a fiery passion that burns through every lie she's been told about the beautiful, dangerous world of the Fae. But something is not right in the fairylands. An ancient, wicked shadow is growing, and Feyre must find a way to stop it or doom Tamlin and his world forever. I also want to note I did not mention that there is sexual content in this book.
All right. So, again, we're trying something different. We're just going to see if this works. We're kind of just going to lump sum everything into parts instead of breaking it down chapter by chapter. So, to get started, this book, to me at least, kind of set off more of the world building rather than more of a storytelling. Obviously, there was two places, her family home and then also the Spring Court mansion that Tamlin owns. So there was two main places, but it basically just built both of those worlds. The first half of the book built up the worlds, and then the second half built in the Spring Court, and then we get the Under the Mountain as well towards the end. So get you more of an understanding and a general awareness of where we're at, what we're doing. So, in her village where she is living, her and her family were pretty wealthy, or at least middle class wealthy, and her father bet away all of their money. And so then they end up in kind of a poorer village where they're struggling to have food and it's the middle of winter. So they're really just struggling to get by. I do find the first chapter just kind of lacked much detail. I didn't even know the lady's name in the first chapter. I was just like, okay, who we talk about? Just kind of in the mind of somebody that we're not quite sure who it is. But we end up finding out that her name is Feyre. Is that how you pronounce it? Okay, that's what I thought. That's what I read the entire time, but I was like, I don't know if this is right. I just started calling her Fifi at one point because I was like, maybe I'm not saying it correctly. So I was like, we're just gonna call her Fifi.
Yeah, Feyre is correct.
Okay. Feyre is the main character, and she was actually sworn to help her family survive from her mother. Then she has her father who was beat to almost like to be crippled, so he's hardly able to walk. I do feel like he was able to walk a little bit more than what he kind of added to it, but I really think he had a bit of a depression that caused him to really just go inside of himself and not really be of much use to keep the family alive. But he gambled and lost all of their wealth. Then we have
Well, I don't
Nesta,
know that I would
which,
call it gambling. He was an investor. Something that
well,
he
he
invested
gambled
in
with
disappeared at sea, but I think Feyre mentions it at one point, but he really started out negative. His family had already really gotten him into debt, like his father and his grandfather. And so he was trying to build it out of that debt, and it really just caught up to him. But I do agree that he had like mental health issues that exaggerated his physical injury, and that was like compiled because
Because I
that's
do feel
hard.
like he could have done more than his little wood carvings. I feel
Oh,
like
yeah.
he could have had even if he just sat down and hacked some wood for the girls or something. Like I feel like as the man figure in the household and the father figure, he could have still stepped up in other ways. I mean, even if he just personally took maybe some things down to the market himself and sat in a booth all day and tried to sell it or something like that, I feel like would have been a little bit more contribution than what at least Feyre had said he kind of was contributing.
No, I agree. I think Papa Archerin could have done a lot more. And I think that really is at the core of Nessa's hatred for him also.
So then we have Nessa, and my notes for this book pretty much she was a brat. But I mean, towards the end, we kind of understand where she was getting that behavior. But I do feel like the way she treated her siblings was because she had a problem with her father and the way he handled things. I do feel like was out of line. The way she spoke to them, the way she handled things with them, I just feel like was very wrong.
So let me ask you this. Do you think the same of Elaine?
No, because Elaine didn't really have a bratty attitude about things. Like there was some instances where she was kind of greedy about like the money and different things like that. But as far as the attitude towards Feyre and wanting to do like household chores and things like that, I felt like came across more bratty from Nessa than it did from Elaine.
I do think Nessa had more of an attitude about it, but I don't think Elaine did anything to help either. So, like, also,
Yeah.
it's referenced later that she's a gardener, and it's very common to see on the internet that there's always the question, like, why couldn't Elaine grow them some food and things like
Yes.
that. But it's very common in the fandom that, like, you either love or hate Nessa, and nobody holds Elaine to the same standard as Nessa. And so, as you read, just like look for those things because it's really cool to see the comparison and where we end up with the whole story. But I will say
Yeah,
too,
to
when I
me
very first read the first book, I was like, "What is Nessa's problem?" And now I'm a Nessa girly. So just keep that in mind.
well, I did towards the end get a little bit more like, okay, maybe she's not as bad because after hearing kind of where she came from, I get it, but I don't think she handled it the appropriate way, especially with her. She's the older sister,
Yeah, it
correct?
goes
So it's like,
Nessa, Elaine, Feyre.
yeah, so to me, being the older sister, I feel like she should have had a little bit more maturity to her. And it should have been her place to kind of step up and be like, growing up, my mom had to work quite often. She was a single mom. My brothers, I had to take care of them. I had to make sure that their schoolwork was done. I had to make sure their food was made. Like, taken that little extra role to make sure that my siblings were taken care of. And I feel like she didn't really step up to that standard at all. It was more so, my little sister's got it. She's handling it. And like Elaine, I do feel like to me, she was just kind of quiet, shy, like person. But I feel like Nessa was really outspoken in her brattiness a lot more
See, and
as far as her attitude.
See, and so for me, like, I'm the opposite. I'm the youngest, and I have 2 older brothers that I always had to take care of. So I guess I have a different experience, so I kind of read it with a different mentality maybe. But I do agree that Nessa should have stepped up. But I also think Elaine should have stepped up and Papa Archerin should have stepped up. Like, I
Yeah,
don't think it just falls
it
on
should have been a group
Nesta.
effort.
Yeah, I don't think it just falls on Nesta, which oftentimes,
Mhm.
again, on the internet, that's what we see. Like, people actively hate her over
Yeah.
this right here, the way she treated Feyre specifically.
I wouldn't say I hate her, but I do think that she could have been a little bit more mature about how she handled things. And to me, usually, if one's more responsible in one aspect, you expect another one to kind of step up and be responsible. So maybe Pharaoh was responsible for maybe the gathering of the food, and maybe Elaine was responsible for the interior, making sure the table was set and the dishes were done, things like that. And then maybe Nessa was more responsible for the financials and making sure their books are balanced or whatever the case may be. I just feel like
Teamwork.
neither Elaine nor Nessa really stepped up to add to the team, knowing that, and even she admits it, she knew her dad was not all right in the head, but she never once made the attempt to step up. She basically admits at the end she really only did this because she hoped that he would step up based on how she was acting, which you'd think if that didn't work, you change your tactic and try something else. But I mean, to me, I think if the father had seen all of them kind of contributing and working together and trying to build things for the family as a whole, it probably would have made him step up, just because that's kind of the mentality of like, for instance, if you see like 10 people do the same thing, you're more than likely to go do the same thing. I mean, studies have shown that's a group mentality. So I kind of feel like it's like one of those gang mentality
Like,
kind of
almost
things.
like peer pressure?
Yes, yes.
Well, and
So
so
like I
I think
feel
that's interesting because, and I guess I'm thinking again for me, if I knew only one person was feeding the four of us, then I would realize someone needed to help that person feed the four of us, as opposed to, well, if there's three feeding the four of us, they've got it handled. What could I contribute? That's what, so
no, I mean, I think he would step up if he's seen all three of them contributing in some kind of way. He would then be like, "Oh, well, I'll help you with the dishes tonight," or "Hey, Dad, you want to come help me set the table tonight?" I feel like they could have drawn him into where he just got into a routine of getting out of that depression and kind of be stepping up and participating in some way. It may not be in the full way that he should be participating in, but at least some kind of effort more than what he was. I mean,
gotcha.
just wood carving.
Yeah, well, and I was just wondering about what you thought about Elaine versus Nessa because, and I'll probably send you 1,000 TikToks once you've read the entire series, but it's just so interesting to see how it develops and how different they are treated, even though literally neither contributed and just left Feyre to do it. And not only do they not contribute and left Feyre to do it, then also when she does do it, they're greedy and stingy and not thankful. So
Yes.
it's just interesting to see how, also because we live in such a world that women are supposed to be one way, and Elaine kind of represents what society says women should be, and Nessa is the opposite. So it's interesting to see the internal misogynistic come out against Nessa but not Elaine in the discussions about the book. So I just wanted to point that out and see what you thought about it.
So we get where Feyre goes to sell furs. She does that usually from time to time whenever she kills the animals to try to get some extra money. I find it weird that they did accent quite a bit sort of in the beginning on the children of the blessed, and then towards the middle to the end of the book you just never hear about them again. So I did find that kind of interesting. I don't know if they're going to come up in the future. Obviously, I haven't read those yet, so I couldn't say for sure. But from my perspective, I just feel like it was hounded on them for quite some time. And then it was just kind of like, okay, we're just not ever going to talk about them again.
I want to, so
But
also, and this is not a spoiler because it's never been revealed that it connects, but the mercenary that she meets, there is potential that in a future book we find out that might have been someone from a different series of Sarah. So,
I
listening
did,
to it, I was trying to figure out the description and who I thought it might have been because it is referenced in fan theories and stuff.
well, I did kind of suspect that she was important. Obviously, I haven't read the series, so I don't know the details, but I felt like she was maybe like one of those cross world people that they allowed to kind of communicate and trade on their behalfs, maybe. I didn't know if that was a thing that was possible or anything like that. That was what I suspected because she knew a whole lot more than just like their average legends, stories kind of thing. But I mean, I guess you don't know yet. So, I mean, I would say I don't know how that ends either. So,
No, and I did too. I thought she was going to essentially come back up in this book, like that she was going to be a main character that we find out later, like you said, sort of goes in between, or maybe on her own goes in between. Maybe she had a human lover or something along those lines that we just don't know about. We're going to learn about. We don't. We don't actually in this series ever find out who she is. We might, I guess, because the series is not complete. So technically, in this series, later on we could, but through A Court of Silver Flames, we don't know who she is, and I want to know her identity so bad.
I'm going to be honest, towards the end, I kind of wondered if she was Amarantha in disguise, like a plant, or tried to like get her, you know what I mean? Because they had the curse that basically said that there was going to be this one person that does this and falls in love with Tamlin. So my thought was that she was a plant to figure out possibly who that could be and then try to kill them off, and she just wasn't successful at catching that she was the person. So that was my kind of thought. But I also kind of feel like she alerted Tamlin because she questioned her quite a bit about the wolf fur and stuff like that. And then next thing you know, he shows up a little bit later. And I know he said that he tracked her, whatever, but I kind of feel like the mercenary probably was like, hey, this is the girl from your stories that can break your curse. Here you go, kind of thing. I don't know. That's my thought, but
Yeah, I wondered
I may be off
too, if she wasn't like a human plant for Amarantha or Highburn that you'll learn about later. But we don't know at this point. Hopefully, we find out later on because I would really like to know. Because so, my Throne of Glass series, there's a theory that she could be a character from that series. There's a theory also that she could be a character from Crescent City. So it's very up in the air. We don't really know who it is, but I would hope
Got
that we find that identity out later. But sorry, that was a
um
long discussion about the mercenary that's not even important.
So we get where the beast appears in the doorway. And I did find it a little kind of funny that when she left, she turned to Nessa and told her not to marry Isaac because his dad's known to beat his mother and they don't speak up about it. So I did think that that was kind of sweet, especially considering she kind of had a little bit of animosity towards her because of her not stepping up and things. So I did find that at least like a sisterly thing of I could hate you this entire time, but I'm still going to make sure that your well being's cared for. We end up finding out later that Tamlin was lying whenever he stated that there's this clause in our law that since you've killed my person, you have to come with me or I have to kill you. And she ends up agreeing to go. I did think it was kind of sweet that the dad did step up for a minute and say, hey, don't return, even if you're able to escape. Like, don't come back here. You're better than this place. I did think that was kind of sweet, but at the same time, I kind of wanted her to be like, okay, well, if you know that, why aren't you stepping up to try to help out in the family so I can leave and get out of here?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was too little too late comment.
Also, it made me sad because Feyre, for her human life, always had the dream of Elaine and Nessa getting married, and then she would stay and take care of Dad. So, like,
Hmm.
her dream life was her and Dad.
Yeah.
So, for him to be like, you deserve so much better. Also, for Dad to be so optimistic was weird to me. It didn't feel like it fit with the character. But for Dad to be like, don't come back, live your life and enjoy it. It was just weird.
Well, I did find it funny though, whenever Tamlin was taking her on the horseback and he starts asking questions. So he basically just knocks her out with magic and has her sleep the rest of the way. I did find that funny, especially considering you've asked this woman to basically come live with you for the rest of her life. So she's going to ask the annoying questions in about 2 days, no matter what. So
Yeah.
why not just endure it for 2 days? But I mean, at the same time, there could have been safety risk in the forest. There could have been like things out there. And if she keeps talking, could put them at risk. I get that. But
I
it doesn't say that. So
Yeah, so when I read it as he did that almost A for safe passage, but also B in the hopes that nobody would see him with her to be cued to the thought, well, is that a human girl? Is he going to break the curse? You know, kind of things like that. I had that thought originally. Then she roams the land, so that doesn't make sense because they would have found out that way. So I don't. Then I thought, well, I guess he was just being a jerk. He just didn't want to listen to her. Okay.
So at first, I was not sure how I felt about Lucian. I was kind of weary of him just because there always is in fantasy, it seems like there's a friend or a close person to some of the main characters that ends up betraying them. So, like, to me, I just was so leery of him at first. It was hard for me to adapt to him and get to know him. But after a while, I did learn to appreciate him. And honestly, I kind of liked him at the end better than Tamlin. He was there for her more than he was.
Fair.
But he was. It's the truth. And then we also meet, is it Alice? Is that how it's
Yeah.
pronounced? Okay, I don't know why they have to spell things like funky. Just
It's in every fantasy novel.
yeah, just spell it normal.
Yeah.
But she's a servant that I consider her more like a handmaid to her
Yes,
because
she's a
she seemed to
handmaid.
always be there to dress her and stuff like that. It seemed to describe her more of a servant, but to me, I feel like she was kind of treated like a handmaiden.
I think she probably normally was a servant, but then when Feyre came, she became her handmaiden also. I think that's how it kind of
Yeah.
connects. I
Which
loved
it seems
her,
like
by the way.
Tamlin and her had a really good deep connection. She stated that he helped her give her a job and things like that whenever she escaped. So I think that he had like a motherly vibe from her and try to help her out as much as possible is what I kind of gathered from their relationship. So she gets to the spring court and she gets bathed and dressed in this fine clothing. I did find it funny that she did not want to wear a dress. It seems like every strong female character never wants to wear the dress, but I get it. It's kind of hard to fight a battle or something like that in a
Yep.
dress, but I did think that was kind of just a fun little take that was put in there.
I think it
We do end
speaks
up
to
finding out.
her personality too. Like it is partially for survival because she can defend herself better in pants, obviously, but you'll see it in other ways throughout the series. It's also just Feyre being stubborn or, you know, not as because
And I think it
I was gonna say a
it
lot.
may also play to the fact that she didn't really grow up wearing that kind of stuff where her sisters did.
Yes.
She didn't really have that life of luxury that her sisters had.
Well, I was gonna say, and it's sort of like, for example, it talks about like, we took Freya out of this role of survival and having to hunt, and that's sort of like a manly role. And then we try to put her into this feminine role where we put her in dresses and curl her hair and put makeup on her. And she tries to embrace it here and there. And she's just like, yeah, I just don't really know that I can do that. Like, you can take the girl out of the woods, but you can't take the woods out of
Yeah.
the girl kind of thing. You know what I mean? So it's really cool to
Yeah.
see that. And it's played on a little bit more as we go through the series.
So we also do find out that there is a deadly disease that has come through the land. I say that with quotations in case you're just listening and you're not watching.
Yeah.
So a deadly disease that has been spreading the last 50 years. We do end up finding out that their masks are stuck to their faces. So they're wearing almost like a
It's a masquerade.
masquerade
Yeah.
kind of, but it seemed to be all characters from what the descriptions basically were, different kind of
Animals. Yep.
animals, different creatures from their lands or whatever. So we end up finding out that Tamlin is the beast, like I said prior, and he can shapeshift, but Lucian cannot shapeshift. Am I right about that?
That's correct. So Tamlin could.
But Ryson can, the guy we get to at the end, right?
What did you just call him?
Is it Rysand?
Rhysand.
Rhysand?
Yes.
That is not how it's spelled whatsoever. Pronunciation.
Anywho, okay, so Tamlin
I'm gonna
can.
call Rai.
I call him Reese. That's what they. That's also a nickname for him is Reese. That's what I call him.
See,
But
I can get behind Reese, but I can't get a hold of
yeah. Well,
Reese. Rysand sounds like the
well,
same.
it's so yes. Tamlin can shapeshift. He can the people of his court. He can shift them if necessary. That's how he puts Andros into the wolf. But Lucian on his own cannot shapeshift. And then Reese can shapeshift. And he has his. So what you get in this book are wings and talons on his hands and feet. There may or may not be more later to come.
To me, that's confusing though. Whenever you say fairy, I'm thinking just like wings and like, I can get behind dark wings. I can get behind like fairy sparkly wings. But to me, to add the claws and the talons and stuff, to me was just a whole different level of weirdness for me. I don't know. It was really hard for me to get behind the fairy thing. I'm not gonna lie.
I
If
know.
they would have exited the fairy thing, I probably could have got behind this a whole lot more in this book. But I'm
I will
still gonna give it an effort.
I will
And
say in this
we
first book,
continue.
it talks a lot more about claws and talons than it does really for the rest of the book. I think it's almost just sort of your introduction to that they can shapeshift, so that if they do it later on, you've already been introduced to it, that sort of thing. But for the most part, for Rhysand, his wings are the only thing that's really referenced again later. And I can't wait till you learn more about the wings, but we'll get to that
Well,
later.
my thing is with Tamlin, does his wings go away when he shapes into a
He
beast?
doesn't have wings.
I thought he was a fairy.
So he's a fae. Not all fairies have wings in this book.
Well, that's even more confusing.
So
Did not catch on to that.
yeah, no. So Tamlin, Lucian, none of the Spring Court, I think, that are referenced have wings. There may be one creature that's referenced that has sparkly wings, but the dark wings that Rhysand has belong to a particular group of people in his court that we learn about in the next book. But Tamlin does not
That
have
makes it
wings.
makes it 20 times more confusing.
That's because you're picturing Tinkerbell, babe. This is not Tinkerbell.
No, but like why are the wings like nitpicky on who they get to?
Because it's the different shape-shifting. They have different. So there's another court we learn about later on that has wings in a different way. But Spring Court does not have wings unless it's
We
specific to
should have
that
just exited
species.
this whole entire fairy thing. This is just way too confusing for me.
But here's the thing. If they have wings, it says very clearly in the book that they have wings. If it doesn't
Okay,
say
we
they have
already have
wings, then
pointed
they
out
don't
I
have.
don't read the details or remember the details very well at all, which is why it's 10 times more confusing for me.
Okay, well, what the book says is what happens, Emily. So you have to read the book and comprehend it.
But if it's irrelevant to the
It's
storyline, I just
It's not
Xate it and
irrelevant.
put
The
it to the
fact that
side.
Rezan has wings, you later find out why he has them, and it's very important to his character.
As of right now, it's irrelevant in my brain.
Ugh. You're also going to meet
Xate
2 more
both
characters
fairy.
later that have wings, and I cannot wait till we meet them.
Honestly, to me, in this book, this specific book, if we just Xated the entire wing thing, it would have made more sense to me.
Okay, except you're the only person that had wings the entire book. The only time wings are referenced is the end, babe.
Well, I just thought it wasn't that important. They were just trying to normalize them. So they just
No,
didn't mention it as
no,
always.
you put the wings in there for the whole book, and nobody else did that.
Well, that's because they talked about it too much in sections.
They only talk about the wings at the end.
Well, no, because they're talking about fairies. So to me, fairies have wings. Okay. Okay.
Also, Tinkerbell doesn't have pointed ears.
What does pointed ears have to do with anything?
The Fae have pointed ears.
Oh, well, I missed that part of it as well.
Oh my gosh. Did you read the same book as me?
I did, but I just didn't find that those details relevant. I just thought fairies, fae, they all look the same.
Okay, so here's
One was dark, one was
here's the
light. I
problem.
just me, I imagine summer as like their wings being like orange and like sunrise, sunset. And then I had spring court of like glittery bright greens and pinks. And then I had winter court, blue and white wings, and then the night court black wings, obviously, because that's association.
The only court that has a group of people that are significant to this story that have wings is the Night Court. Nobody else does. There may be some lesser fairies who have wings, but it's not relevant. Oh, well, and like the adder has wings. Obviously, it's referenced in there. But
So not only did she complicate fantasy
she
elements,
did not
she really
complicate it, baby. You read her book with your
okay.
idea instead of reading what she said the book has. That is not her
The way
fault.
it's supposed to work. You're supposed to build the world yourself in your mind.
See, you are, but from the details that are given to you, you don't pull out random ones from thin air. Also, I will say I have read other like fae slash fairy books in general, and for the audience to know, this is your first introduction to it, so it is brand new to you. So for me, I didn't come in with different notions because I had read others, so I had an idea of what to expect.
Okay. So, let's see, we get to where they start sitting down for dinners, and we do have where Feyre had stolen a knife from the dinner to try to protect herself. She had actually previously tried to set a trap as well, which I kind of found a little funny because I really don't know if that trap would have done absolutely anything for her, but it made her sleep better that night. So I give her that effort.
Yeah, I think it was
Um,
just a warning, like she says, so that if someone came in, she would at least know someone was coming in, as opposed to being asleep and some weirdo being in your room.
I think though she was way too exhausted to even like wake up for it. It seemed like
Possible.
so. I mean, I it would have been funny if it would have happened during the middle of the night just to see how she would react, but or at least one of the other nights that she may have said it. I did find it cute whenever Lucian invited Feyre out for hunting and he starts talking more about their curse and what regards he can. I do think he was really trying to help her realize as much as he possibly could what it was, but I think she was just so new to what their world was because she'd only heard it in legends that it was hard for her to really catch on to all of the hints until the end.
Yeah. Well, I think
So I,
they sort of, I think by saying like that it was like a sickness, I think it was misleading
yes.
for a
Yes,
human
yes.
at least. To Faye, it's different because they don't get sick, but we do get sick. Like she even referenced like my mom died from an illness, so that's what she's thinking is a disease, not obviously Amarantha.
Yes. I do think because they do, I think, refer to it as a curse a little bit too. So I don't understand why they didn't kind, or at least I think she may have referred to it as a curse with her mask or whatever. So when she
Yeah.
referenced it as that, I don't understand why they couldn't just be like, yes, that's what we're talking about. Like, I can't say it directly, but I feel like maybe they could have agreed with her to kind of help her understand, like, the disease is that, like, you know what I mean? I don't know, but that could have been not a back door, that was a possibility because
Or things like it's
Amber,
a man-made disease. You know what I mean? Like, hints getting closer to where they wanted her to be rather than just assuming she's going to catch on. Also, I think they really underestimated the fact that this girl has been starving,
yeah.
underfed, underclothed, like never had her own room, her own bed, and then you give her all these good things. She ain't worried about y'all. She's over here basking in the fact that she gets to go eat 3 meals a day. Like, you know
Yes.
what I mean? Like, that part of her brain is, I don't know.
Well, she'd been in fight and flight mode the
Yes.
entire part of her life, basically. So, I mean, it was hard for her to, I'm sure, switch that off to be able to be like, oh, I can be comfortable and listen into what everybody else's problems are because my problems aren't here anymore. But I also think not bringing her family with her was also a part of why she didn't catch on sooner because she was so caught up and worried about her family the entire time.
Yeah.
Because to me, that also didn't make any sense how Tamlin would never tell her how he was assisting her family so that way it could comfort her to be more comfortable there. Because I think if he would have told her that, she probably would have been like, okay, well, I can relax, I can enjoy my time here. And maybe she possibly could have fell in love a little bit sooner and actually said it out loud. But
Okay, listen. When he actually sends her home after he says it to her for the first time, then sends her home, I thought you could have given at least 24 more hours and put her in so many positions to say it back to you that to increase your odds a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Like something, but it's Tamlin.
Well, before she leaves, I do find it crazy with the instance with her father appearing in the garden. And at first I was like, girl, how does this even make sense that your father has appeared here and he hobbles around your house and can barely even walk around your house, but yet he's literally made a 4-day journey to come straight to Tamlin's house because he knew who he is. And like the thought process at that point was far fetched.
No, when
And she can't think it was starvation or anything like that that made her think that. I don't know where the common sense missed there at all because I feel like she's smarter than that.
I agree, and I don't know if that was, like, showing us how desperate or how guilty she felt, that maybe that's why it manifested as dad, but when she finally says, "Oh, how stupid, of course he's not gonna come save me," I kept thinking, "Exactly. That should have been your first thought. That's not my dad,
Mhm.
of all people." You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I thought it was dumb.
Well, I did kind of find it weird with Lucian how if knowing what the curse was and that she was supposed to be falling in love with Tamlin, why he was trying to spend so much time with her. I did find that a little weird because to me, I feel like you know something that I don't know with that little sneaky grin there.
I know a lot of things that you don't know, and every time you mention
I
something
know.
that might not even be related, but it makes me think of something else, I get a grin because I'm like, she doesn't know that's gonna happen later.
Okay, well, your sneaky little grin there. I feel like I'm on the right track there. But I just don't understand why he did that. I mean, to me, if he's really trying to get this mask off his face and to, make the world better or make his court at least better, why he wouldn't be, trying his best to get out of the situation.
Well,
I
I will
mean, even like selfishly.
yeah, well, I will say there are moments it's referenced where Lucian kind of like makes himself scarce so that Tamlin is forced to spend time with her alone.
But that was almost after Tamlin, I don't want to say he didn't really make a jealous scene, but he seemed jealous where Lucian caught on that he was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go. You two spend the day together." Thing. So it's almost like Tamlin had to like throw a little hissy fit of, "Well, you're spending time with my girl," like kind of like attitude, not outright, but subconsciously. So it was almost like he had a little small
Subconsciously.
tantrum. It almost like he had a little tantrum though to Lucian to be like, "Oh yeah, this is not my curse. This is his curse. You two hang out." You know what I mean? It was weird.
Yeah, I think it was so I read it more as A, he wanted to know the threat that was in the same house as him. B, Tamlin wasn't spending time with her, and so he spent time with her, I think, just to warm her up in general to their kind. And
Okay,
then
I can follow that
and
one.
then once he kind of got her there and Tamlin sort of was like, "Do I have to?" And he was like, "Yes." Then he started setting them up kind of to have alone time. And then from there, you know, would make little comments here and there about them too, like, and like flirting and things like that. So I think it was his scheme the whole time. Let me tell
I
you
could
this.
get behind that one because they do say that Tamlin's not very warm and open, so I
Mhm.
could get behind Lucy and kind of warming her up. So I can get, yeah, that one makes sense.
Well, I can tell you this too, and this doesn't spoil anything, but his fox mask is very fitting for Lucian.
Okay.
I'm not gonna tell you anything else, but I'll tell you that.
Okay, that just opened up a door
There's
that
so many
and
things though you don't know, and I can't wait till you find them out so that we can talk about what your thoughts are about them.
I feel like I was much better not spoiling Iron Flame than you
That's
are with
because you only
this.
had 2 books.
Yeah.
I have 5 big books. I have so much knowledge about this series in my brain. Ugh. And she does really well, again, sort of like Rebecca did, putting little things in there so that later on when you find out the information, you're like, oh my gosh, it was hinted everywhere here. Like, it's insane. But okay, anyways, continue.
Well, since I disregard the little things, I don't know if that's going to be relevant in my discovery or not.
Yeah.
But
Well, you're not going to reread it. We've already discovered that.
so we do end up finding out what courts there also are whenever she ends up in the library and sees the map. So we have a spring court, an autumn court, a summer court, a winter court, a day court, a dawn court, a night court. Yeah, and that's it.
7.
That's a lot. I do find it weird that they do day, dawn, night, and then also do the seasons as well. I do find that a little weird, but I guess I'm sure there's probably some war at some time that they're like, oh, we got to break off and come up with some different names because there's only 4 seasons. But they could have like Midsummer Day Court or something like that, you know?
The solar courts, day, night, and dawn, are a little weird, but I do love the idea, and it's very common in fantasy novels to have like 4 kingdoms based on the season, and it's like perpetually that season in each of them. And I can't imagine what it would be like to live in perpetual winter or perpetual summer and what that would be like.
Mm-mm. I couldn't do it. I couldn't
I
do
can't
it.
see, I can't wait till you meet the other characters from some of these courts so we can talk about them.
Mm-mm. I could deal with maybe 6 months out of the year, maybe in the summer,
Yeah.
and then maybe 6 months out of the year, like fall. But if I had to like be 6 months or more in winter,
Yeah.
not for me. Not unless I was stuck inside the entire time. I could deal with it if I was stuck inside, but if I had to be out in it, tap out.
I don't think that I could do that for winter or summer. Like that perpetual high heat, perpetual freezing cold. I would like a break from that.
As long as there was a beach involved for summer, I could be there for 6 months, maybe longer. But like at least a minimum of 6 months if there's a beach involved. If there's no beach, no. I'm tapping out there too.
Okay. Okay. Well, we shall see if there's a beach.
Fall's my favorite time of the year.
Mine too, but I don't want to live in the autumn court.
But I don't know about it yet, so I'm gonna say that's my court for right now.
Well, you do know some of it.
Enough details for me to be like, yeah, that's not the court I want to live in. The night court still sounds fascinating to me too.
Okay, so Lucian's father slays his lover, and his brothers hold him, make him watch. And then his brothers under the mountain are encouraging Amarantha. None of that matters to you?
That's the higher powers. They ain't relevant to little old me. I just
Sure.
referenced Taylor Swift. I've listened to her way too much today.
Sure. We shall see. We'll come back at the end to decide what court.
Okay. So we end up getting to the point where Feyre tries to trap a cereal?
Surreal. That's correct.
Okay. Yeah. I just abbreviated a lot of this and just called it so-so. So that was my so-so.
I called it a Surrey for a while. I was like, I
I
can do
just like
the Suri. Pretty sure that's a Surrey,
it was
but it's weird.
it was literally like the first 2 or 3 letters. I just like duplicated it because Tam Tam was also a name as well. So.
Tam Tam. Did you call it loose loose?
No, I knew how to pronounce that one. That one was fine. We were good. We were following that one.
I love that you can pronounce Lucian, but you can't pronounce Feyre.
Because all I was thinking the entire time was Lucius Malfoy.
Or Tamlin.
No, I could pronounce Tamlin. I just wanted to call him Tam Tam.
Oh, okay. You just wanted to give
Because
me
I
a
called
nickname.
her. Because I just called her Fei Fei, so I felt like Tam Tam and Fei Fei.
They're such horrible nicknames. And the cereal being Susu? What?
It made him less, like, threatening to me, okay? I
Okay.
don't know.
Didn't you love though that Lucian like set her up with that? And then Alice is like, "You fool! All you had to do was give it a new cloak, and it would have told you everything you wanted to know." Like, I love that. Like, oh, what do you think you're doing?
Well, I did really like, though, that he did have a lot of confidence in her to catch it and not die,
I think he
even
had
after
confidence
she
in her.
he, I feel like, did to an extent. But at the same time, again, why would he want her to die if he thought she could break the curse?
I think he. Okay, so do you remember who ends up saving her
Saving her
in that
from
in
the
that scene after she talks to the cereal?
Yeah, Tamlin.
Mm-hmm. So I think Lucian set her up to need saving so that Tamlin could save her.
Yeah, that does make sense. I do follow that one.
I do not believe
Yeah.
that he thought she was actually going to be able to catch the cereal, and the cereal's talked more about later, so that might help. But I think that's what it was set up for because he also tells her that he'll be near to help, and in reality, he never comes to help. Tamlin does. I'm telling
Yeah,
you,
that makes
he's
sense.
he's a sly little thing. He's sneaky.
You just keep referencing foxes.
What his mask is. What?
You're being so fishy.
You're looking way into it because you're trying to think, what am I thinking? What do you think? I'm not. I'm really saying he's just sly. He's sneaky. He's a lot smarter than we really give him credit for a lot of times in this series. I will say that.
So we get to the point where Tamlin ends up rescuing her, like we said, and she has killed Naga.
That sounds right.
So she ended up killing a couple of them, and Tamlin ends up kind of impressed by her that she was able to capture this surreal,
Surreal.
surreal, and then
Surreal.
she was also able to kill the Naga.
Hmm.
Too many complicated names. And I do like that at the end he does offer to write letters for her, which I don't know why she didn't try to take him up on that, but I honestly I wonder if he would ever have sent them if even she did write them because she never did get the letters her family sent, which I don't know if they actually sent them or not, or if
Well,
that was part of the fantasy that they had.
I don't know if he really would have sent the letters either, though, because I feel like the glamour was essentially to make them almost forget her, like for
Yeah.
her to be like in the back of their mind. And if you send letters, that's going to that's going to obviously bring her to the forefront. But if she's sending letters about the Fae and their potential issues that could leak over into the human world, then obviously she's not with her great aunt. You know what I'm saying? So I think you're right. I don't think he ever would have given them.
Well, either that or he would have altered what she was saying to because I mean she couldn't read it to know how it actually was being sent. So he could have altered it and be like, "Hey, great, doing fine. You know, how you guys doing? I went
Which
wandering through the garden today, or
which
you know,
defeats
something
the
like
entire
that."
purpose of the letter anyway. So you might as well not
Yes.
send it. I didn't tell her sooner though, like how he had taken care of her family.
Yeah, because I don't feel like that was relevant to the curse in any way
Mm-mm.
for him to keep that a secret. So maybe he just didn't want to seem that nice to her. I don't know.
I don't know.
Or maybe he thought that she was gonna only fall in love with him because of what he was doing for her family. So
There were no rules on why she had to fall in love with him. Just that she had to
no,
hate
but
him and then fall in love with him.
maybe he just
I think maybe he's
wanted
just
it to
ignorant.
that's a possibility. It's a man.
It's a man. It's exactly what it is.
So he then also offers to buy her paint equipment and show her the gallery that he has. He's had it closed off since his parents had passed. So I thought that was really cute. And honestly, though, what was she doing with her time the entire time? Because, like, to go all day long and just roam a garden or sit and eat every couple hours, like, to me, there was just not enough things to do in a day, you know, because she couldn't read. So it's not like she could read a book. So
Because she couldn't
I
read.
mean, she just go pick grass and count the grass, you know what I mean? It just sounded it just to me was a little weird that they waited that long to find something that she liked to
Well, I think
give her.
most of her mornings up until probably lunchtime each day were filled with riding and hunting with Lucian and the other guards and stuff. And so I think she pretty much just had to fill up her afternoon at that point, which I
Gotcha.
agree, just still walking around the garden for 4 hours is still a really long walk.
Every day.
Yeah, every day. The garden's not changing every day, especially in
No.
eternal spring. So I do agree. Like there was some time in there that we were like, what is she? What could she possibly be doing at this point?
Well, especially if you're gonna take her captive, but not take her captive, you think you would be like, "Hey, to make this more comfortable for you, is there a list of things I can provide for you?" Or even if Alice had asked, like, "Hey, I'm been told to get what you whatever you needed. Is there something I can give to you so that way you have something to preoccupy your mind with?" Even if it was like a dartboard or an arrow field where she was just like sitting there shooting arrows at a target all day in the garden or something. I feel like there could have been something they could have given her to occupy her time, or they could have at least asked before this point. Because I mean, we're 17 chapters in, and they're just now caring about what she wants to do in her free time.
Well,
So
and I think that's partially because he realized she was illiterate. I think he might have just assumed she was reading or spending her time doing things that normal people would do that can read, as opposed to, oh, she's illiterate, then what does she do for fun? I think that kind of sort of made him start thinking, like, oh, maybe she does have other hobbies that I didn't think about, you know? But I will say,
yeah,
too, that I also think part of it is just he just didn't care about her up until that point.
yeah.
She can do whatever she wants as long as she stays out of his way, almost was kind of the vibe at first. So I think it was just a way to build their relationship. Although I will say that as soon as he found out that she liked to paint and he wanted to buy her paints and he also wanted to show her the gallery rather than just sitting her to go look at it, that was cute.
So we do get that scene where the fairy from the summer court ends up showing up with his wings ripped out of his back, which was really violent. And I know you cried.
I did cry when I very
uh,
first read it.
I do know it was a really sweet scene, and I think it showed a lot of character for her,
I agree.
especially holding his hand and everything as he's passing. I do think that reflected a lot on her, and I do think that maybe opened Tamlin's heart in that moment towards her a whole lot
Yep.
more, to realize that even though she has no idea who this fairy is, she's willing to spend his last moments with her so that way he's not alone. The very next thing he does is they decide to like take her out on a picnic, and he starts like showing her his world and kind of where he's at. So I really think that was like the opening
And they
moment
go
for
swimming.
his heart. We do find a lot more about Lucian in that chapter as well, where we end up finding out that he's the son of the High Lord of the Autumn Court. His love was murdered by his father. His brothers try to kill him. And he also does admit in that moment that he did hear Feyre scream whenever the Naga had tried to attack her. So he did hesitate selfishly a little bit. But basically, from then on, their roles kind of escalate as far as romantically. We also get where the Ator,
It's Attor, I believe, but he's called an adder.
so we do find out about Tamlin's family being killed by an enemy court, and he was kind of forced into the High Lord role that he has taken on. Um, we do end up to a fire night, which was a weird situation. I didn't know how to pronounce that name, so it said fire night, and I stuck with that. um,
It's Calamai or Calamai, something like that. But this is our introduction to Reese. And I just wanna know, like, what your thoughts were when he appeared.
honestly, I didn't really have much other than he was mysterious and suspicious, but other than that, I mean, I was just like, okay. But I did think it was nice that he had good intentions right off the bat to protect her. Because, I mean, typically, like, because I feel like he came in as like a bad guy role. So I feel like whenever that kind of happens, but like I told you, I really feel like he was giving off like Damon Salvatore vibes a little bit, where he was trying to be a hard ass, but then he really wasn't.
Well, I just wondered
So
because those I didn't know if you took note of the way that just his presence terrified the 3 creatures that were trying to attack her, and how reverent and quick they were to scurry simply because he appeared.
I did take in that. That was actually one of the smaller pieces of information that I did actually collect. But I just thought that was because he was a night court fairy and they were just like terrified of him as a night court fairy. Because it didn't really mention like whether or not, at least not that I took in. So take this in my brain. Not in how it was written. Okay, Carly. So
Okay.
my thought was they weren't night court fairies, and then they were talking to her, and then he appears as a bad guy kind of vibe that they were trying to make him seen. He comes as the bad guy, the bad reputation, whatever, and then everybody's afraid of him and his reputation, so they scurried away. That's how I took that scene, but
Okay.
I could have read it completely wrong, and it's not how it was written. And yeah.
Okay. I heard Taylor Swift when you said "Bad Reputation." I heard the song going, sorry. Got distracted.
I'm making some good references tonight.
Yeah. Uh,
It takes listening to her all day for that to happen, apparently.
well, and so
Uh,
it'll be interesting to see if your perception of it changed, if you ever would have thought that might have, and not necessarily with just Rezan, but, like, with the entire event itself. Did you like how Tamlin pushed her against the wall and bit her neck, and so she slapped him?
I did like the slapping part because I think if a man did that, I probably would punch him in the face. But I do think he did give her several warnings. So did Lucian. So, I mean, you were given multiple chances to walk away. But I do think it was in a way sexy, but at the same time, the biting of her neck was a little excessive. So I would have probably punched him at that point, especially because she still wasn't sure what her feelings were with him just quite yet. But I do think that was a turning point where all of a
Yep.
sudden she was just like, I need him, I want him kind of vibes.
I agree.
Um, so I think it's worked out in the favor of moving things a little bit further because I do think if that did not happen, I do think it would have still been like slow rolling for
Mhm.
them to get to that point. So I do think that was kind of like a canon event.
So I totally agree. That was like a pivotal moment in their relationship going from sort of flirty to like legit romantic and
Sexual, yeah.
yes.
I really did like the next morning after he bit her though, that she did go to the dinner with the bite marks exposed. Like it was almost like, I'm not going to try to hide this. I did really like that. And then afterwards, she does gift him a painting that she had done for him. And I thought that was really sweet as well. He did end up kissing her to remove the glamours off of her vision so she could see all of the servants and people that were working there, which I did find it weird that she never did question that there's only like 3 people in the household. But also, were they just like jumping out of the way as she's walking down the hallway,
So
or
that's the funny thing. So all this time, she makes several references to like how quiet the house is. And the house is only quiet because she cannot hear them. There are servants
yeah,
walking right past her. She has no idea. So, like, all these times that she thought she was alone, looking at the gardens, looking at the paintings, the servants are just walking by looking at this human girl, like, what is she doing? I thought that's so
I'm gonna be
funny.
honest, the only thing I thought of is like farting in the hallway or something, and then like she thought she was alone and there's like 20 people in the hallway.
Or like if she sneaks in the kitchen to steal something, like thinking she's getting past the
Yes.
cooks or something, and really there's like 15 people over here working just watching her take an apple or
Yeah.
something. That's what I kept picturing. I was like, that's hilarious. Also,
And then I was also wondering how many people were actually in the room as she was like bathing or like getting dressed and stuff like that. Like, were they allowing her that kind of privacy or were they not? Like, it was I was kind of questioning that as well a little bit.
well, I think it's funny that
Usually, whenever somebody's like dressing in the Renaissance kind of theme stuff, there's usually at least 2 or 3 people working on whoever they're dressing. So that to me was a little weird, anyways, that it was just Alice.
well, and I think it's funny too that he told her first of all that a kiss is what had to be done to remove the glamour.
Hmm.
Little flirty thing, just remove the glamour.
Hmm.
But, like, then acted like as if it was no big deal to remove the glamour. Like he hasn't been hiding all of these people from her this entire time she thought she was alone and she wasn't. Like, the embarrassment
Hmm.
I'm a weirdo regularly, but when I'm alone, I'm even weirder. And if I found out all these people had witnessed me being really weird, I'd be mortified. I'd be like, I would never know a moment of peace ever again in that house.
Well, my thing was though too is like if she didn't have that on, then she probably could have like filled her time with like getting to know the people around her or watching somebody work or just something simple and basic, but it could have possibly helped fill some of her time of boredom that she had and make her time a little bit more enjoyable. I mean, Alice seemed nice, but it didn't seem like she wanted to be like BFFs like
She's more like a
with
mother
her.
figure.
So yeah,
She'd
so
reprimand
I
her
mean,
when she needed it.
she really needed like someone to be like a BFF or something for her. We do get the point where the High Lord of the Night Court displays a head as a warning on the top of a fountain, I believe.
Something like that.
And oh, this is where they go to the summer solstice celebration, and Feyre does decide to drink the wine, and she kind of gets a little drunk, and she proceeds to dance in front of everybody, which we end up finding out that Tamlin's over there playing the little violin
Fiddle.
and fiddle. And so Tamlin ends up stealing some kisses, and I do find it really sweet that Feyre says that this is the happiest moment of her life because if we're going to be honest, it kind of is. I mean, she really hasn't had anything to like celebrate and forget her struggles and worries. And even in the house or the manor at that time, she really hadn't had anything to like look forward to with her days and stuff besides, painting. And I mean, even that she wasn't enjoying all the way because she was still thinking about home and painting home and things she remembered from home. So they're having lunch the next day. They were kind of in the middle of a sentence, and all of a sudden Tamlin or Lucian stops speaking and tries to hide Feyre, and they glimmer her behind Lucian so that way
Glam
glamour
and glimmer.
glimmer.
And glimmer her.
I kept calling it glimmer in my head. I don't know why.
That's all right. You know what it is. That's all that matters.
Yes. So when we end up getting Rhys, who appears, and he's in the middle of kind of having a conversation, and he does reference Amarantha. So then she does relate that Amarantha is the her that everybody can't speak of. I guess she was almost like the she who must not be named in this book
Mm-hmm.
up until this point. And then Rhys does spot the glimmer, and he does end up confronting Feyre, and basically Tamlin begs him not to tell Amarantha that she's there, which at this point they kind of seem like mortal enemies. So I kind of find it funny that he did withhold some of that information. She does give a false name whenever she's asked her name, which we end up finding out later on saved her family. But at that point, that's whenever Tamlin decides it's too risky to continue trying to move forward with everything. But they do end up having sex before he does finally make the decision. He does tell her he loves her, and find it sweet that he does say he loves her thorns and all, to kind of reference the title of the book.
What did you think about him making Tamlin and Lucian bow to him?
I felt like it was a little petty, but I did find it unnecessary, but I'm sure it probably is a reason why in the end of why that was the case. But to me, it was just a little petty, and it was just kind of like at this point in the book, I didn't really like Rhys as much as I did towards the end. So at that point, I was just kind of like, okay, well, you're just the bad guy playing into the role of trying to make the good people seem weak. But I also think he was kind of trying to flirt with Feyre a little bit there too, to be like, hey, I can make your big strong man fall on his knees and beg for mercy kind of thing. So I don't know. At that point I just felt it was kind of petty though.
Okay.
I don't know. I've seen fan art of them two together, so I feel like at some point they end up together, but at that point I don't know what that is.
We'll see.
So I'm trying to just keep in the moment and feel what I feel in the moment so that way I don't think of what that happens.
Yeah. I just
I
know
know your face.
when I read, even before I read the whole thing, when I read it the very first time, I love a morally gray character. And so I was like, "Oh, I really like Rezan. Like, I hope we get more of him because I like him better than I like Tamlin at this point. And not necessarily like him better as a love interest, but like him better as a character." And so I was like, I really hope we get more of him. We got a little bit more of him at the end of this. And then when I finished this book and I started the next one, I was like, please let us get a whole lot more of him because I just love that morally gray would burn the world for one person instead of sacrificing the one person to burn the world, which is essentially kind of what Tamlin did. I mean, he was happy sending her back to be miserable in the human world and letting everyone else be damned, essentially, with Amarantha. So I don't know. It was interesting to see the two different characters and how they each did things. So
Yeah. I mean, at that point, I didn't really see him as a really important character. At this point, I was still like rooting for Tamlin and her to end up together. Now, at the end, I have a different opinion, but at this moment, I was still like, just back off, let her break the curse, like, let her resolve everything, like, go away.
did you understand at that point that he knew her name or could have taken her name from her brain, but accepted the name that she gave him? Or did you believe that he really thought her name was Claire Better?
No, I think I didn't believe that he knew her name was Claire, but I didn't think that he thought he knew what her real name was. But at that point, I was just thinking that he was like, I don't really care that much, so I'll take that and just move on. I just kind of seemed like nonchalant, like she's not that important
Okay.
to know what her name is, kind of thing. And I didn't ever think that it would come back relevant at that point.
You think you'd find Claire better staked to the wall later on when she got under the mountain?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did see that one coming. I figured there would be something crazy that would happen, but I figured it would just be like when they captured her, they would call her Claire and she'd be like, haha, really, my name's Farah or something like that. Like, I don't
Gotcha.
know.
Okay.
I I don't know. I didn't see it relevant as far as at the moment, but later on obviously it was. So she does return home and she ends up finding out that Tamlin has set her family up for like high success. So he had paid off her father's debts. He'd gotten them a new home. He had sent them money to survive on, and we also ended up finding out that there was a healer that they ended up paying to get her father some medication to heal him a little bit better as well. So I do find that super, super sweet on his part. And I do feel like that was part of the glamour that she had already like that had been said at the time that she had left, that they were kind of set up for that pretty much instantly. At least I would hope so by all the other hints that he had. But again, I don't know why he didn't say that fresh off the bat and just, I don't know, reassured her a little bit more.
Yeah.
She probably wouldn't have been wanting to go home as much either because she knew everybody was taken care of. We do end up finding out from Elaine that Nesta had attempted to go see Feyre and supposedly the carriage had broke down, but Nesta is kind of going off an even more colder vibe than what she had prior, and we end up finding out after everything that the glamour didn't work on Nesta. So she knew the entire time what had happened, what had gone on, and she basically just played the part with her sister and her father, other than her trying to go and rescue her, which that made me a little warm up to her a little bit more because she did try to attempt to go save Farah, even though what she could have done against a beast, I don't know. But she also does admit in that moment that she did hate her father for not trying to save them this entire time and leaving all that pressure on Farah to live and survive. She ends up also at that point, relating back to Claire, we end up finding out that as she's going through town that there was a family whose house had burnt and that one of the family members was missing. However, that at that point beforehand, she ended up in town. She didn't really know what the name of the person is, but once she ends up in town, she realizes that the name she had given Reese was the family that had houses burnt down. Um, so Feyre instantly knows something's wrong. So she tells Nesta to hire some guards and that something was wrong in the spring court and that she needed to run if any a hint of trouble comes their way. And so when she ends up back in the spring court to try to rescue Tamlin and ends up back in the manor, finds out it's destroyed and that Tamlin and Lucian are missing. So
So let me ask you this. First, do you have a theory or anything to add about the glamour not working on Nessa? Do you think there's any significance to that?
to be honest, I had one of two theories. It was kind of like an Elena Gilbert kind of thing where she had vervain, so that way it like blocked her from being able to have her memories like taken. So she had, they mentioned the bracelet a couple times and stuff like that. So I thought maybe hers just had something special that like blocked it or something like that. Or like her, it's kind of like, can't remember her name from Divergent, where her brain just wasn't the same as everybody else. And so something was wrong with her. Or I actually had three theories. Or she wasn't a full sibling of the other two girls. And so like maybe a father or parent was like fairy or something like that. And that's why she wasn't as inclined to that.
Okay, we shall see.
Okay.
And
I
then,
may be wrong completely.
no, you're okay. That's more theories than I had when I read it. So that tells you all you need to
Okay.
know. But
I did actually think in deep detail about that one, but
that's why I'm asking just to see little things what did stand out to you and like what didn't. But okay, and so let's talk about the fact that she did attempt to go save her. Do you think that like she really tried her hardest to go? Do you think like she tried to get help? Any thoughts about that?
well, I know she said that the reason why she ended up ending things with, I think it was Isaac or whatever, because he wouldn't go with her. So I think she did try to recruit some people to go with her. And then the mercenary, I think that she had talked to about the wolf thing, was the one that actually ended up taking her. I do think she did make a valiant effort towards it, but whether or not she was paired or able to do anything about it, I don't think she put as much thought into it, just like in the moment, like, hey, I need to go rescue my sister, take me there, let's go. And then I feel like there probably was some big event that did end up happening to why she didn't make it there that maybe we'll learn about kind of more in detail later on, because I don't feel like the mercenary would have been like, okay, well, you paid me half and I'm not going to get half if I don't deliver you here. Or maybe she ended up in the spring court and found that, like, maybe it was whenever they were out picnicking or when she was swimming in the pond or something like that, and she ended up like seeing her happy, so she just like left her there and went about her business. I don't know, I feel like there's a couple different things that could have happened when she was on her journey, but
Okay. Okay. Did you find it interesting that she was the only one that Feyre told the truth to start? I guess
no.
when she finally decided to leave, she sort of broke the glamour for Dad and Elaine. But full details of all the stories, does it surprise you that Nessa was the one she told?
No, because she hadn't been glamored, so that would have been the obvious choice to me to she's seen it all happen, so she just further explained what happened after they left to me, so to me it made sense.
Did it
Even if they weren't close, I feel like she was the only one that was kind of in on the secret, so it would make sense to me.
did it warm you to Nessa when Nessa told her essentially like to go be happy and to not come back? As
It
opposed to when
it
Dad said
did.
it the first time?
Honestly, it felt better from Nessa than it did from the father, to be honest, for me. Because the father, up to that point, had really done nothing, where Nessa had been kind of keeping everything together and keeping the glamour. I know she wasn't like hunting or anything like that, but she almost stepped into that caregiver role that Feyre had had prior,
Yeah.
just kind of in different ways, based off of her talking about how she had helped keep the glamour and just kind of kept them going and kept them on the ball and not thinking about that kind of thing. So to me, I do feel like it was a little bit better coming from her, but I think after knowing where her anger was coming from, and it wasn't really towards Feyre, it was more towards their father, I do think that I did have a little bit more of an opening towards her, but at the same time, her explanation for why she did certain things, just like basically, I kept taking money from you from what you sold because I knew you'd always find more. Like to me, that was a little selfish. And really, even then, honestly, if they probably hadn't been like freely spinning things as much, they probably could have helped them get out of the situation they were in and less pressure on Pharaoh's back. So I kind of felt like it was executed very poorly. And I did warm up to her a little bit more in that, but I don't know. To me, it was just like slightly better coming from Nessa than it was from the father, but it wasn't really to me any big difference in feeling.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so then she gets back to the spring court. Did you find that interesting that she was able to make her way back even though both the journeys she was totally knocked out?
I did find that weird. Yeah. Yeah. Theory on that? No, none of them. But I
No,
did find
none
that
of them.
weird. No theories. No theories in brain. But
All right. And so then we get to the scene where she gets to the manor, like you said, and she realizes that everybody's gone, or so she thinks. And then Alice comes out of the woodwork. And I thought Alice was kind of harsh.
yes.
I understand where Alice was coming from. I understand the anger, the desperation, the fear that led to that conversation. But, like, how that's Farah's fault is beyond me. And I thought, I don't know, if someone was trying to save me, I think I might be a little nicer.
I think to me, I took it as, oh, you're back a little too late. I feel like in her mind, she was a little bit upset that it was just like, you're a little too late.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she also has to realize from Feyre's point of view, she didn't get all the pieces to the puzzle. She just had part of the pieces and the rest were missing. So she couldn't complete it.
Yeah.
So it didn't make sense to her until later on. And honestly, a lot of the pieces didn't even make sense until Alice explained them to her. So,
And even then, there were pieces that she couldn't explain to her still, too.
exactly.
So then, obviously, Feyre goes under the mountain. Under the mountain, there are 3 trials and a riddle, which I know we talked about it. You thought the answer to the riddle was death, which
Yep.
which I will say, when I first read it too, I was like, "What?" I was like, it seemed almost like so obvious that that could not possibly be the answer.
Yes.
And then love ended up being the answer, and I was like, "Are you serious?" She fought trial 1, she defeated the worm. Trial 2, luckily Rezan helped her with that one because she's illiterate. And trial 3, she had to kill 2 Fae and stab Tamlin and hope he didn't die, all for the riddle to be for the answer to the riddle to be love. And the whole reason we're
I did
here is because of love.
I did find it stupid that his heart was made of stone. It may be relevant later, but like in this moment, I was just like, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
I think the whole
I
point
don't know.
was like because his heart was closed off to her. So I think by putting it in stone, it was supposed to close off his heart to be able to fall in love
Do
with
you think that came with the curse, or do you think that was something he was born with?
that came with the curse.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the entire time Amarantha had known that no God. Amarantha had known that she was going to execute these specific trials, or at least the last one.
I think she made his heart stone. I think she did it like metaphorically for the purpose that like nobody else could penetrate it. Does that
Gotcha.
make sense? Not physically, but romantically. Like if she can't have him, he's not going to love anyone else either.
Also, the
That
question
makes
is,
sense.
how did anybody find out that he had a stone heart? Did she tell everybody when she cursed them, or
That's what I'm
did like
guessing.
somebody else try to stab him?
I'm guessing she said you're cold to me, so now you have a heart of stone or something like that, and that's how they realized it was. I don't know. It's kind of it really is set up that way simply because the third trial becomes that, but the trials were a spontaneous thing. So I guess that's just the way it was written so that the third trial would work out. But I kind of think of like, like in Beauty and the Beast when he curses her, it's because he doesn't have a heart, is what we're saying. Like
Yeah.
he's cold
Okay.
and disinterested and hateful and cruel. And so it's like a heart of stone is like a common phrase for that kind of person. So I think that's what she was playing on. But at the same time, it also doesn't make sense because the third trial was not planned. And so therefore we had to connect it somehow, I guess. You know what I mean?
See, 'cause she seemed very strategic, especially like with the way she made her be very specific about how she had to say things, and almost like a genie kind of situation. Like you had to word it
Well,
very
that's the Fae in
meticulously
yeah,
so it
that's the Fae in
were
general.
well. And so I feel like to me, she already kind of had the plan when she did the curse of how the trials would go if that ever did happen.
But that's not accurate though, because we know she got Claire and she just tortured Claire. She didn't offer the trials to Claire.
Well, maybe she did if she admitted that she knew Tamlin, because she kept saying she didn't know the man, she didn't know anything about him.
Yeah, maybe. But if her plan all along was to offer the trials, then who cares if this human girl doesn't know? Let her test it out and die against the worm.
I also don't understand why she just didn't put her in the trials rather than torture her.
That's what I'm saying. Like, if the trials were actually going to be an existing thing, then Claire would have gotten to the trials and died in one of the trials.
Well, I'm saying even though even if she said, "Hey, I don't know him," I don't know why she just didn't throw her to the worm.
So, speaking of the worm, let's talk about trial one. Did you or did you not love, first of all, how she realizes and beats the worm, but then how she throws the bone at the end at Amarantha on her dais?
I did like that. I felt like the worm thing was a little stupid. It was very, again, something just stupid out of the box. Like it was just adding another layer of something outrageous to the already outrageous. I don't know. It was just like another level that I feel like we could have avoided. I feel like the second and the third trial would have been enough for me.
Okay.
Like there wasn't like an epic battle for me. I was just picturing this little worm like, "Oh, I'm hungry. I'm coming to get you," kind of thing. I don't know.
Again, you
Like it
clearly
wasn't
didn't
like
read the
the
book
Chamber of
then.
Secrets thing for me. Like the it just wasn't exciting for me. Like even reading it, I just wasn't like, "Oh my god, the worm's gonna get her," anything like that. I was like, okay, well, there's still another part of the book, and I know that she can't just die. She's the main character, so obviously she makes it out of it. So it wasn't just like, I don't know.
Well, so part of it, one of the reasons that I love that scene is because A, it shows. So there's a comment
I did
that,
like her out of the box thinking. I did like that.
yeah, well, and as I say, so there's a comment to where it says that Rezan is the one that told Amarantha that she's a hunter. And so he almost set it up in a way for her to at least have a chance at succeeding with the first trial. And then also, he's the only one that bet on her surviving. Love
Mhm.
that. And then there's a scene where he, like, yells at her or says something and she flips him off. Oh, it's because
Mhm.
she's putting the mud on her, and the one fairy says, "What is she doing?" And he's like, Feyre just became invisible, and she just flips him off anyways. I think it's the funniest thing. Like, he seems like such an enemy, but obviously we realize by the end of it he's actually not an enemy, at least in this
Mhm.
scenario. He obviously did not want Amarantha to continue to rule either. So it's just funny watching the little ways that he, in his own role as Amarantha's whore, also stood up to her, fought back against her in different little ways or whatever. So
Mhm.
I think like that is what several times that we see that happening, especially under the mountain.
I do find it kind of weird though, as Amarantha's whore, that she allowed him to almost like display a relationship or at least flaunt her around. Because to me, Amarantha comes across as somebody that wants all the attention on her, a very narcissistic kind of personality as well. So to me, it was kind of weird that she allowed that to happen. So I'm kind of wondering what Reese had sold to her to kind of make her agree to that,
I
to be
think he
honest.
sold it more as like a humiliation for Feyre rather than
Hmm.
benefiting him, because even the scene where she catches him in the hallway and he makes it look like it was him that left all the marks on her or whatever, because Tamlin previously did, and he pretty much takes the fall for it and plays it off that way as if he's taking advantage of her. So I think it's almost like he's made her believe like it's more torment for Feyre. Whereas in reality, it's the way he takes a stand against Amarantha.
I personally kind of wondered because so one of the warnings that Alice said before she entered the cave was that she needed to not believe everything she'd seen or something along that lines. So the entire time Tamlin sat next to Amarantha, I didn't think it was Tamlin pretty much the entire time. I was like, yeah, she's just got him locked in a dungeon. Like maybe he was the one that she kept hearing the screams and torturing and stuff like that. And it was the adder the whole entire time or whatever. But I don't know. The entire time and up until he kissed her in the hallway. And even then I kind of was like, maybe it's not him. I just kind of wondered if it was the adder the entire time.
Well, and so it wasn't, obviously that one instance it
Yeah.
was, but it wasn't. So what are your thoughts on his behavior under the mountain? That he sat on that throne impassive the entire time except for that one night, and then he gets one moment alone with her and what he wants to do is have sex. What are your thoughts on that?
I would have walked out of the mountain and been like, hey, you can have him.
Me too.
Yeah.
I was
Honestly,
mad.
at some point I probably would have been like, Reese, you can take me. I agree to come home with you once a week. I'll just do it permanently. We're good. I'm out.
Once a
I'd rather
week,
not
but for
die.
52
So,
weeks, like
yeah. Let me change my agreement with you. I know I negotiated down with you, but I'm going to negotiate back up because, yeah, I found him weak. I found him very selfish and not only that, but I mean if he really loved her as much as what he did, I don't feel like you could just sit there emotionless and not even care or seem interested in any. That's why I was kind of thinking it was the Adar or whatever, however the heck you pronounce it,
yeah, adder.
so that's why I thought it was him the entire time, because I was just like, there's no way I could sit there and watch somebody I love go through all this and not me even at least grunt or, oh my gosh, or,
Look
sigh of
away.
relief or, yeah, something. But it just seemed like he was just like,
No, she literally says he must be under a spell, and Lucian is like, he's under no spell.
yeah,
He's playing his role. And I would have said, well, that must be a nice role that he's playing while I'm over here getting beat to down every day. Like,
yeah.
what? Yeah, and that
I
really made me really disenchanted with Tamlin. I think that Under the Mountain is when I was like, okay, maybe I don't actually like him.
I'm gonna be honest. By the end of this, I like Lucian way more than I liked Tamlin because I feel like Lucian was actually trying to help her. Lucian was willing to risk his life rather than Tamlin to save her.
Did it or did it not make you a little like, "Aw," when Lucian's mom returned the favor because she gave her name?
Yes. I did like that. I did like that a lot.
Lady of the Autumn
Uh,
Court.
I did like that a lot. I thought that was really sweet, and to me, I do see where maybe she wasn't really as hard, or she didn't agree with a lot of the things that his father had done. She, because of that one act, it kind of to me spoke a lot more than just her repaying a favor. But of course, I'm sure she probably couldn't leave without probably dying as well.
Okay. Do you think there were any allies under the mountain that were working with Rezan or working with Lucian or Tamlin during this time period?
I know he said as he was trying to dig out the memories, people were making faces or having reactions and stuff like worry and stuff on the faces. So I'm sure there was plenty. As far as who they were, I don't remember, but I do think that there was probably multiple people trying to get out of it, because I would imagine doing the same thing over and over every single night and basically being trapped in the same place would get very boring pretty quickly. And especially whenever you're unwilling and not really wanting to be there, I do think that that would get old pretty quickly. And then also, she wasn't really making power moves at this point in my mind. Like, she was just making revenge moves. So I think at that point they were just like, okay, well, she's not really helping us build any power, the ones that wanted it. And so, like, I think at that point they were kind of just seeing her as like a something they could discard, because she wasn't really helping them grow in power. It was more so just for her own personal benefit at that point.
Okay. Okay. So then we get to the end of the trials. Obviously, Feyre did win the trials. Amarantha says she's not going to uphold her end because she wasn't specific enough. But then, as she's attempting and successfully does murder Feyre, Feyre answers the riddle and turns out that it's love. And it works. It's an instant break of the curse. Any thoughts about that scene?
I'm so glad that Tamlin finally decided to react in any direction. Probably would have woke up and punched him in the face. However, like, I did find it a little weird that all of the High Lords, like, to me, all I imagined was like this glowing orb just like floating towards, I don't know, towards her from each person. I'm gonna be honest, it was giving kind of, I don't know if you ever watched the Winx Club, but like it was giving me Winx Club, but I don't know. It was a little weird for me.
Anything about that
Uh,
scene stand out to you?
Mainly I was just angry at Tamlin the entire scene, so I couldn't really tell you if anything else stood out to me, because I was just like, man, you didn't even care about her the entire rest of the time, and then now you care about her after she's dead. Okay. So
Okay, all
that
right.
was about it.
So thoughts about the fact that now that she's been essentially
Well,
remade into
didn't Reese
Fae.
speak in her mind?
What do you mean speak in her mind? At what point? During the death scene?
Yeah.
So what happens at the death scene is that she ends up in Rezan's mind after her neck is broken.
Oh, that's weird.
That's who she talks about seeing through someone else's eyes. It's Rezan's eyes.
So he like absorbed her subconscious?
So the theory at the time that she sort of thinks through afterwards, I think, is the bargain, the bond that they had was like a connection that allowed him to hold on to her long enough for her then to be replenished back into her own body.
Hmm.
So it's talked about a little bit more later, so you'll get more details later. But I wondered if you picked up on that she was looking through Rezan's eyes. Do you think? Do
No,
you
I just thought
go ahead?
he was speaking through her mind is what I had kind of thought, but I was also really clouded with my anger, so I couldn't tell you.
So then, do
I don't
you?
know. I just found it really stupid that he literally did not care until after it was way too late. Like at that point, and like
And then
at that point, I would not have gone home with him afterwards. I would have just
no,
been like, "Dude, you didn't care about me this entire time." Like,
I'm telling you, the hallway scene where he tries to have sex with her and she's like literally 2 days away from the final trial and he hasn't shown an ounce of emotion the entire time and then that's what he does. I would have punched him in his face and
mm-mm,
probably found someone else to be with that night just to hurt him.
mm-hmm, mm-mm.
But so do you find it like any thoughts on the fact that when they remade her, she came back as High Fae now, and so she has the pointy ears, and she's now Fairy, whichever you like to
I
call
did
her.
find it weird, but it makes sense just because the rest of it was kind of weird. Did she have wings or did she not have wings?
She does
Okay.
not have wings.
Okay. I just, I don't know. To me, it made sense with the storyline, but at the same time, I was just kind of like, okay, well, good for her. Now she gets to live forever with the dummy that didn't want to save her.
Do you think there's going to be more to that? The fact that she's become Fae? Do you think she's going to have powers? Do you think like any of that? Any thoughts?
I'm sure there's going to be more because it didn't really elaborate on anything after that. So I'm sure there's going to be more to the story. But as far as what it is, I have no earthly clue. But I'm sure there's more to it just because it did not elaborate enough on it whatsoever. It just kind of was like, hey, now I'm high fae. Okay, end of scene.
And then okay, so they sort of meet, talk about what goes on from here. They all go home, but right before they go home, the next to last scene is where Rezan comes to chat with Feyre.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on that scene? That's when she sort of says that they're not necessarily friends, but they sort of understand each other better at this point. And she acknowledges the struggle that he probably had to be under there for so long and not be able to spread his wings and fly. And so she kind of empathizes with him in that scene. But at the very end of that scene, he sort of like has a strange look on his face and then disappears. Any thoughts about what that is?
As far as what the reaction was, I don't know. I reread it a couple times because I was like, oh, maybe she said something that he reacted to a little weird. But as far as overall, I couldn't really, unless she was like reading her thoughts or something. I don't know. I don't know quite what could have been, to be honest. But I did reread it a couple times to try to figure out, pick up what exactly it was. But it didn't come to me. I did find it kind of flirtatious though, their interaction. It was like borderline flirtation. I wouldn't say it was full on flirtation, but I do think it was a little bit there. A little something could be there.
Okay. All right. And then they go home and the book ends.
I did find it sweet though that they did end with Alice and her nephews like laughing and running around the garden. I did think
Yes.
that was kind of sweet because I was curious like whether or not they ran, whether or not they went to Nessa and whether or not they survived. So I did like that it ended that and did answer that question for me because I was generally curious about that.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of my because there really wasn't a reason to mention that she had two nephews and that they were somewhere else and or whatever. But to then at least connect it and finish it, and we get to see these two happy kids in this world that she just saved as a human, illiterate girl. I did like that we got to end on such a
Yeah,
happy note like that, even though it
yeah,
wasn't pivotal to the story.
absolutely.
I'm going to start with the final ratings and thoughts just because you're going to have a lot more to say than I am because I don't want to risk giving away any spoilers for the next couple books. So for me, my rating is going to be based on reading all 5 books. So it's a little difficult. But this one, I would probably give a 4.7. There were some things about the book that I would change, but for the most part, absolutely loved it. I've reread it multiple times. Listening to it this time was such an experience. I listened to the graphic audio, and that's so cool, and absolutely loved it, devoured it, and I'm already listening to A Court of Mist and Fury for the next one. So, yes, I love it. Emily is not as happy with it so far, so go ahead, let you do your thing.
So I would give it like a 3.9 to 4-star rating just because I just kind of wanted more. I feel like there was not enough action. I feel like there was not enough really love, even. There was nothing that stood out to me that I was like, oh my gosh, that was so much more than anything else. It was just kind of like, okay, there's some love. Okay, there's some action. Okay, there's some hate. Okay, there's some rescuing. It just seemed like there wasn't enough for me. It was good, but as far as right now, just reading this one book, I would not reread it. I've heard the second one is better. I'm going to keep an open mind with it. I do think that because of the universe that Sarah has built and knowing that all of them kind of relate to each other, this makes sense. But in reading it in the moment and just individualizing with just this book, it wasn't to me enough story. It was just more building up where what the map looked like in your head kind of thing. Ended it not liking Tamlin as much as I did on the front end. I don't think Feyre should have went back with him. I think she should have at least went home and be like, hey, you have to woo me a little bit to make me love you a little bit more than what I did whenever I left this mountain. Because to be honest, to me, a test of love in my eyes, whenever I heard that, was more so, or trials for love, whatever you want to put it as. To me, I interpret it as it's a trial for both of them rather than just one of them.
Okay.
And I don't feel like Tamlin showed his love in any way by him not stepping in or at least attempting to step in. Because usually when you get those kind of things where like someone's holding your love hostage and they're like having to like basically act like they're okay, you've even gotten scenes where they've like attempted to like stand up and the person's just like pushes them back down, or guards step in or whatever the case may be, and he didn't even have like a flinch almost. And I do think that
Do you think, let me ask you one more question while you're talking about that. Do you think it's significant that there are several references to him losing his temper and his like claws come out when he loses his temper, but under the mountain it does not happen a single time?
So I gauged it as one of two things. So I thought it was the adder the entire time, pretty much. So that kind of justified it for me. But then whenever I kind of started doubting that was the case, I thought, well, they mentioned that his powers are weakened underneath the mountain because of Amarantha's curse or whatever. So I kind of thought that maybe he couldn't. But then now that I'm thinking back on it, it could also be like somebody could have been controlling him a little bit and his emotions, maybe. I don't know. I don't
Okay.
know if that's a power that they can have or not, but
Okay.
maybe they were just making him really calm. That would only be the only justification that I would be okay with him after the facts. But I did really like Lucian. I was kind of weary of him at first, but I did really like him. And I honestly, I liked him better than Tamlin at the end just because he really did try to help her. Reese, I'm kind of indifferent about. I do think that's probably going to evolve to something just because she has to see him at least 1 week out of the year. But I kind of liked him better than what I like Tamlin. So honestly, he's better in my book at that point at the end of the book. So, but to me, it wasn't about like a morally good character or anything like that. I was kind of open to whoever was it, but I was kind of just waiting for that one moment that I was like, oh my gosh, this is the person for her. This is the person I know that it is. And I never really felt like that honestly at all. I was just kind of like, okay, well, this may be it. Nope, not yet. Okay, well, this may be it. Nope, not yet. So I don't know. I just was waiting for something more. Like even like the action scenes weren't even like really actiony for me. It just I don't know. It's I don't know. And the fire night to me was kind of stupid. I just felt like it was like a high school bonfire where they just like line up for the quarterback to choose who he's going to have sex with. I don't know. It was kind of weird. I don't know.
It is weird. I agree.
I did really like Alice towards the end, even though she was a little like stern. I do understand her perspective, but I do think a lot of her anger came from, hey, you risked the lives of my nephews that I've kind of sacrificed a lot for. I did like Nessa a little bit more at the end. Elaine, kind of indifferent still. Father, I don't know if we're ever going to talk about him again. Wouldn't care if we did or not, to be honest. But, you know.
So, if you liked this episode or any of our other episodes, please subscribe to get access to bloopers, extra content, and more on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Patreon, and YouTube, and all other platforms where you can listen to podcasts. There's so many, so I can't name them one by one, but we do have it posted on the social media.
You can also send us book suggestions, comments, or general inquiries to our email at likewereadthem at karlandpodcast.com. You can also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. We can't wait to hear your thoughts. I know that the Massverse has a lot of following, so I'm excited to hear what everybody else's thoughts are on this as well.
As always, we appreciate you tuning in. Thanks for sticking around this long. Next week, we will be discussing A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. I'm going to read the back of that book real quick as well, just as a little intro. So, Feyre has undergone more trials than one human woman can carry in her heart. Though she's now been granted the powers and lifespan of the High Fae, she's haunted by her time under the mountain and the terrible deeds she performed to save the lives of Tamlin and his people. As her marriage to Tamlin approaches, Feyre's hollowness and nightmares consume her. She finds herself split into two different people, one who upholds her bargain with Rhysand, High Lord of the feared Night Court, and one who lives out her life in the spring court with Tamlin. While Feyre navigates a dark web of politics, passion, and dazzling power, a greater evil looms. She might just be the key to stopping it, but only if she can harness her harrowing gifts, heal her fractured soul, and decide how she wishes to shape her future and the future of a world in turmoil. So, tune in next week to hear more about Sarah's universe, and as always, we promise to Carl them like we read them.